The music blared, and everyone was laughing. The room was filled with joy, people dancing, chatting, and celebrating. It was supposed to be a moment of happiness, a birthday celebration, a night to remember. But in the blink of an eye, the atmosphere changed completely. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the music, a loud slap. The crowd froze. All eyes turned toward the center of the room. She stood there, shocked, her hand pressed to her cheek, her gaze locked on her husband. His face was a mask of fury, his eyes burning with something she couldn't quite understand. Her heart raced. She hadn't seen it coming. A slap. At her birthday party. Her friends were silent, watching with wide eyes. Her husband, Alex, stood there, his hand still raised as if he hadn't quite realized what he'd done. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke anyone who dared speak. Her mind was still processing the shock, but her body knew what to do. She didn't move. She didn't cry out. She simply stood there, frozen in place. For a long moment, no one moved. The music, once loud and full of life, seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the sound of a heavy, uneven breath, her own. Her skin tingled where his hand had left its mark, but it wasn't the sting of pain that filled her. It was something else. Something deeper. Then, as if her mind had caught up with her body, she did the only thing that came naturally. She laughed. It wasn't a forced laugh, nor was it one of nervousness. It wasn't a laugh of disbelief. It was something far stranger. It was a defiant laugh. A laugh that carried with it years of buried anger, a laugh that threatened to undo everything. A laugh that made him question everything he thought he knew about her. Alex's expression faltered. His hand dropped slowly to his side, his body tense. He stared at her as if trying to make sense of the situation, but nothing made sense. He had never seen her like this before. The room remained still, but the eyes of every single person in that space were on her. A few people began to shift uncomfortably, unsure of what to do. Some exchanged confused glances, others looked down, as if pretending they hadn't witnessed the spectacle. But she couldn't look away from him. His eyes, filled with anger and regret, searched hers, hoping for some kind of explanation. But there was none. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her laugh spoke volumes. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Alex's voice broke the silence, hoarse and shaky. His voice trembled with emotion. Was it regret, fear, or something darker? She couldn't tell. But he was shaking now, not in anger, but in something far worse. He was scared. She took a step back. The crowd started to murmur. Her mind was still processing the slap, still feeling the sting on her cheek, but there was something else she couldn't ignore, the silence that had fallen over the room. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for her to say something. To react. To explain. But the truth was, there was no explanation. This wasn't a moment that could be explained. It was raw. Unpredictable. A moment where everything changed, and she wasn't sure what came next. "Why did you do that?" she finally said, her voice quieter than she expected. The words were calm, but her heart was racing. "Why?" He opened his mouth to speak, but the words failed him. He looked away, his gaze shifting as if he was looking for the right words, an excuse, a reason, something that could justify his actions. But there was no excuse. The slap had come out of nowhere, unexpected and cruel. She could see the confusion in his eyes now. His hand was still trembling at his side, and his face was a mixture of guilt and anger. It was as if he was fighting with himself, one part of him regretful, the other still simmering with rage. I don't know," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "I lost control." "I lost control?" she interrupted, her voice sharp. "You slapped me. In front of everyone. At my birthday party." Tell me how that's losing control. The room remained eerily quiet, save for the occasional shuffling of feet. No one dared speak, no one dared move. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would she cry? Would she scream? Would she forgive him? But she didn't do any of those things. Instead, she stood there, watching him with cold eyes, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. She wasn't angry, not yet, at least. She was still in shock, still processing. But there was something else there, too. Something deeper than just the sting of the slap. He took a step toward her, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. But she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking past him, at the guests who had been watching. Some were avoiding her gaze, others were whispering to each other. She could feel their eyes on her, and it made the whole situation feel even worse. But she wasn't angry at them. Not yet. She turned back to Alex. You didn't mean to. You didn't mean to slap me. Her voice was steady, controlled, almost eerie in its calmness. She was speaking to him, but it was clear she wasn't really there anymore. Her mind was far away, somewhere else, thinking, reflecting. Her eyes met his again, and for the first time, she saw it, the fear in his eyes. He was afraid, and not just because of what he had done, but because he had no idea who she was anymore. The woman he thought he knew wasn't here. In that moment, she wasn't the woman who loved him, the woman who had shared everything with him. She was someone else, a person who was far harder to read. The slap had revealed something that neither of them could ignore. Something that had been buried for years. Something that was about to break open and change everything. I don't know what to say anymore, Alex admitted, his voice cracking. He looked as if he was on the verge of tears, but there was no way to undo what had just happened. I don't think you have anything left to say, she said quietly. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea, giving her space as she made her way toward the door. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the quiet hallway. She didn't look back, not once. The guests were still in the living room, murmuring in hushed tones. They had seen the entire spectacle. Her heart pounded as she leaned against the cool wall, trying to steady her breath. She had to think. She had to clear her head. She could still feel the burn on her cheek where his hand had struck, the stinging reminder of what had just happened. But it wasn't just the slap that hurt, it was everything that had led to it. The tension. The years of quiet suffering. The things unsaid, ignored, and buried deep under the surface. It wasn't the slap that had broken her. It was everything else that came with it. Her legs shook as she slowly slid down the wall, sitting on the cold floor. She couldn't think about what was happening back there, in the living room. The awkward glances. The whispered conversations. She had to shut it all out. She thought about the look in Alex's eyes, the mix of anger and confusion. He had never done anything like this before. Sure, they had their disagreements, their small fights. But this? This was something else. Something darker. Something deeper. She let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on her. The party had been for her. Her birthday. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. A day of joy. But instead, it had turned into this twisted nightmare. And now, she was alone in the hallway, trapped by the choices they had both made. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, expecting a message from one of her friends or maybe even from Alex. Instead, it was a notification from her bank. A text telling her that her account had been accessed. She frowned, reading the message twice. It didn't make sense. She hadn't made any transactions. Not today. Not in weeks. Her mind raced. She quickly opened the app to check her balance. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the numbers. Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn from her account. It wasn't a small amount. It was enough to leave her questioning everything. She stood up, her mind spinning. Could this be a coincidence? Was it possible that someone had hacked her account? She didn't know what to think. But in that moment, she realized something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. The events of the night weren't just about the slap. They were part of something much bigger. Her phone buzzed again. This time with a message from her best friend, Laura. Are you okay? I saw what happened. You need to talk to me. Let me in. She stared at the message for a moment, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to explain everything over text. She didn't want to talk about Alex, about the slap, or about what had just happened. But Laura was her closest friend, the one person who had always been there for her. She typed out a quick response. I'll call you later. I need some time to think. She shoved the phone back into her pocket, her mind still racing. The night was spiraling out of control, and there was no telling where it would end. She needed answers. She needed to know what Alex had been hiding. There was something off about him tonight, something she couldn't put her finger on. Her legs carried her back to the living room, but she hesitated before walking in. She could still hear the faint murmur of voices, the awkwardness in the air. They were all talking about her. Talking about what had just happened. She could feel their eyes on her, even though they hadn't seen her yet. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The room fell silent the moment she entered. Every eye in the room turned toward her. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. They all knew why she was here. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Are you okay? Her friend Laura asked softly, stepping forward. She nodded, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just needed some air. The room seemed to relax slightly, but she could tell they were still on edge. Everyone was pretending like everything was normal. Like the slap hadn't happened. But it had. And nothing would ever be the same again. She turned her gaze to Alex, who was standing in the corner, looking lost. His shoulders were slumped, and he seemed to be avoiding eye contact. She could see the guilt in his eyes, but there was something else too. Something darker. I think I need to go home, she said, her voice steady but cold. Wait, Alex spoke up, his voice pleading. He stepped toward her, his hand reaching out, but she took a step back, shaking her head. No, Alex. I think you need to be alone, she replied, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. You need to figure out what just happened. What you did. And why. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, not waiting for him to stop her. The cool night air hit her as she stepped outside. She didn't have a plan. She didn't know where to go. But she couldn't stay in that house any longer. She needed space. She needed time to think. As she walked down the street, she felt the weight of everything pressing on her chest. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from her sister. She picked it up without thinking. Hello? Where are you? Her sister asked, her voice filled with concern. We were worried when you disappeared. I'm outside, she replied, her voice shaky. I just needed some air. I don't know what's going on. I'm coming to get you, her sister said. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just stay where you are. She hung up the phone and continued walking, her mind still racing. The events of the night were starting to feel like a blur, but one thing was certain, she couldn't go back to that house. Not tonight. Not after what had happened. Her sister arrived a few minutes later, pulling up beside her. She got in without saying a word. The drive was silent, the tension between them palpable. They didn't need to talk. She could feel her sister's concern without having to ask. When they finally arrived at her sister's apartment, she stepped out of the car, her legs heavy with exhaustion. She had no energy left to process everything. She needed answers. She needed to know why Alex had slapped her. Why her bank account had been accessed. And why everything seemed to be falling apart at once. She collapsed onto the couch, her sister sitting beside her. "Talk to me," her sister urged gently. "What's going on? What's happening with Alex?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know anymore." Her sister took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." But as she sat there, her mind still reeling, one thought kept running through her head. There was more to Alex's actions than just a sudden outburst. Something had triggered him. Something she hadn't seen before. And whatever it was about to change everything. The morning light crept through the blinds, casting faint shadows on the walls. She had barely slept. The events of the previous night swirled in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. She hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly, to unravel so violently, but here she was. Alone, shaken, and questioning everything. Her phone buzzed, breaking her out of her thoughts. She sat up, the weight of exhaustion pulling at her limbs, but she had to face it. She had to deal with it. Slowly, she reached for the phone, expecting another message from Laura or maybe even Alex, but it was a call. She stared at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name. It was from Alex. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to talk to him, not yet. But then, something in her gut told her she couldn't avoid this conversation forever. Not if she wanted answers. She answered the call, her voice low, shaky. "Hello? I need to talk to you." Alex's voice came through the phone, strained and thick with emotion. "Please." The desperation in his voice made her stomach twist. It wasn't just guilt anymore. There was something darker in his tone, something that told her this conversation wouldn't be easy. "I'm not sure I'm ready to talk to you yet," she replied, her words careful, guarded. "You need to hear me out," he said, almost pleading. "Please. I know I messed up. I don't know what came over me last night. But there's something you don't know." Her heart began to race. "Something I don't know?" She paused, unsure of what to say next. She could hear his voice wavering, as if he was struggling to find the right words. He wasn't the type to open up easily, and this sudden shift in his tone only made her more suspicious. "I'm listening," she finally said, sitting up straighter, the weight of the conversation already settling heavily in her chest. There was a long pause on the other end, as if Alex was trying to collect his thoughts. Then, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't just slap you. There's something bigger going on. I've been hiding things from you. 4 months now. And I never wanted you to find out this way." Her blood ran cold. She pressed the phone tighter to her ear, her pulse quickening. "What are you talking about?" Alex's voice grew more frantic. "I didn't want you to know, but I've been under pressure. There's been someone watching me. Watching us. They've been blackmailing me." Her mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. Blackmail? Was this some twisted excuse, or was there something more to it? She had no idea. But her gut told her there was something he wasn't telling her. "I don't understand." "Who would be blackmailing you?" she asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. Her heart felt like it was lodged in her throat. "I can't say much right now," he said quickly. "But there's been money involved. And not just the bank transactions you saw. I've been forced to do things I didn't want to do. Things that I'm ashamed of. But I couldn't tell you. I couldn't put you in danger. Her mind spun. The feeling in her chest, the sensation of dread, only grew stronger. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, but everything felt like a lie now. The slap, the money, the secrecy. Nothing about this made sense. What kind of things, Alex? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I can't go into details, he replied, his voice trembling. But it's not just about me. It's about us. And I've made some terrible mistakes. I've been keeping things from you. I was supposed to protect you, and instead, I dragged you into all of this. But I promise you, I never wanted to hurt you. I was trying to protect you by keeping it all a secret. She closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She had no idea what to believe. Who was this man? The one who loved her? Or the one who slapped her without warning? She shook her head, trying to steady her racing thoughts. I don't know what to think anymore, Alex. I know, he whispered. But I need you to trust me. Please. You don't know what kind of danger we're in. Her heart skipped a beat. Danger? She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. There was something about his tone, something about his words that didn't sit right with her. Was this some desperate attempt to make her feel sorry for him? Or was there truth behind it? She wasn't sure. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. I need to see you, he said, his voice quieter now. In person. We need to talk face to face. There's too much going on for me to explain over the phone. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking it over. Part of her wanted to scream, to hang up on him and never look back. But another part, the part that had loved him for so long, wanted to believe him. She didn't know what to do. Where do you want to meet? She asked, her voice barely audible. Meet me at the park. In an hour. I'll explain everything, I promise. She didn't say anything else. She simply ended the call, her mind in a whirl of confusion and dread. She didn't know what kind of game he was playing, or whether she could trust him. But she had to find out. She had to know what was really going on. 1 hour later, she stood in the quiet park, the trees casting long shadows as the sun began to set. The park was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. She clutched her phone in her hand, unsure of what to expect. She had never felt this uncertain in her life. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the area, but there was no sign of Alex. Her heart began to race. She had already told herself she wasn't going to let him manipulate her again. But she couldn't help it. She needed answers. Finally, she saw him. He was walking toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. His face was drawn, pale. His eyes were wide, almost wild with fear. Alex, she called, her voice shaky. He looked up, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He simply stood there, as if he was gathering the strength to speak. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice trembling. I should have never done that to you. I don't know what came over me. But there's no excuse. I've made a lot of mistakes. She crossed her arms, her heart pounding in her chest. You said there was something bigger going on. Something I don't know. What is it, Alex? He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. I told you I couldn't explain over the phone. But there's something I need to tell you. Something that will change everything. You need to know the truth. She swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving his. What truth? He hesitated for a moment, as if debating whether to continue. And then, he spoke the words that would change everything. I'm not who you think I am, he said softly. None of this is real. The man you married, he doesn't exist. I'm a different person. I've been lying to you from the beginning. Her heart stopped. The words hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. I'm not who you think I am. Alex's voice had barely been a whisper, but it felt like a thunderclap in the stillness of the park. In her chest, her mind scrambling to make sense of what he had just said. For a moment, everything around her felt surreal. The trees swayed in the evening breeze, their rustling leaves the only sound breaking the silence. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long, stretching shadows across the empty park path. But none of it seemed real to her anymore. All she could focus on was the man standing in front of her, the man she thought she knew better than anyone. Her mouth felt dry, and for the first time since the slap, she couldn't find the words to speak. What was he telling her? Was this some twisted confession? Or was there something more behind his statement? Alex, she finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling. What do you mean? What are you talking about? He sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. I don't even know where to start. I didn't want you to find out like this. I thought I could keep it hidden, but now, he trailed off, shaking his head. She couldn't take it anymore. Just tell me, Alex. What are you hiding? What's going on? He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. I'm not your husband. Not in the way you think. Everything you believe about me, everything we've built together, it's all a lie. The air around her seemed to crackle with tension. The words didn't make sense. How could he say that? He was her husband. They had built a life together. A future. She had loved him, trusted him with everything. No, Alex, she said, her voice shaking with disbelief. You're my husband. You're the man I married. You can't just say. I'm sorry, he interrupted, his voice urgent. But I'm not. I didn't want to tell you like this, but you have to know the truth. Everything has been a lie, and I don't know how much longer I can keep up the charade. Her legs felt like they might give out beneath her, but she forced herself to stay standing. Stop, she whispered, her mind reeling. Just stop. You're scaring me. I never wanted to hurt you. But I'm not who you think I am. I'm not the man you married, Alex repeated, his voice breaking. I've been living someone else's life. Pretending to be someone I'm not. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you. But I did. And now, he trailed off, his eyes distant, as if he was seeing something far beyond her. Who are you, then? She demanded, her breath coming fast. Who are you really, Alex? He looked at her with a mixture of pain and regret. I don't know how to explain this without everything falling apart. But the man you think I am, the man I've shown you for all these years, he doesn't exist. He's not real. Her mind raced. The past few months, the smiles, the moments of love, the laughter, all of it flashed before her eyes, and yet it suddenly seemed so far removed from the truth he was telling her. Her thoughts became jumbled, spinning in every direction. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. She took a step back, her chest tightening. You're lying. This isn't happening. I'm not hearing this. I wish I were, he said, his voice hollow. But I can't take it back. I've tried to walk away from this life I've built, but they won't let me. And they won't let you go either. You're in danger because of me. Who is? Who's going to hurt me? She felt a surge of fear rise up inside her, her body trembling as she tried to stay calm. Who's behind this, Alex? I don't have much time to explain, he said, his face tightening in worry. There's a group, an organization, really. I was involved with them a long time ago, before I ever met you. They've been watching me. And now that they know about us, about you, they won't stop until they get what they want. Her mind reeled. What do they want from you? What could they possibly want from us? Alex ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting nervously around them. I can't go into detail. But they've been controlling everything. My every move. And I've been forced to play their game. If I didn't, they'd take everything away. They'd take you away. Her heart raced. She felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet, but she had no idea which way to turn. What do you mean they'd take me away? They have power, he said, his voice low. More than you could ever understand. And I've done things I'm ashamed of, things I didn't want to do. All for them. All to keep you safe. But now, they know you're involved, and they're not going to let you walk away from this. They'll make sure you're tied up in it, whether you want to be or not. The chill that ran down her spine felt like ice. She didn't know whether to believe him, but there was something in his eyes, something raw, something desperate, that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking into an abyss. Alex, she whispered, taking a shaky breath. I don't know what you're saying. I don't know if I can believe this. I know it's hard, he said softly. But you have to. If you don't, they'll use you against me. They'll make sure you never get the chance to live a normal life again. You'll be in danger every single day. Her head throbbed, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She didn't know how to feel. She didn't know what to think anymore. She stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. So what do we do now? What's the plan? Alex swallowed hard. We leave. We disappear. Her breath caught in her throat. You want us to run away? To just leave everything behind? I don't have a choice, he said quietly. If we stay here, they'll find us. They'll find you, and I can't protect you anymore. But if we go, if we disappear, his voice trailed off. She looked at him, the desperation in his eyes reflected in her own. There was no going back now. She couldn't unhear what he had said, couldn't unsee the look in his eyes. But the thought of running, of leaving everything she knew behind, terrified her. The life they had built together, the love they shared, was it all a lie? Could she really walk away from it? I don't know if I can do this, she said softly, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can just walk away from everything. I know it's hard, he said, his voice pleading. But if we don't, it'll be too late. We'll be trapped. I don't want that for you. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the trees around them. She felt cold, but it wasn't the chill of the evening air, it was the cold realization that everything she had known was slipping away. I need time, she said, her voice unsteady. I need time to think. Alex nodded, his face full of sorrow. I understand. But please, don't wait too long. They're coming. And when they do, it will be too late. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the park, her heart heavy with uncertainty and fear. The truth was out there. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. The night stretched on, and every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. In the dim light of her apartment, she sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she tried to process the words Alex had spoken earlier. We have to disappear. It seemed impossible. Everything she had ever known was suddenly slipping through her fingers. How could it be true? She kept asking herself over and over again. How could the man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with, turn out to be someone else entirely? Her thoughts swirled, her head a fog of confusion. She glanced around the apartment, the life they had made together, her eyes lingering on the photographs of their wedding day. The memories were so vivid, their laughter, their shared moments, the promises they had made. But were they real? Or had all of it been part of a carefully constructed lie? Alex's warning echoed in her mind, they're coming for you. They're coming for both of us. She couldn't breathe. The weight of the truth was suffocating her. Every instinct told her to run, to escape, but where would she go? She had no idea who she could trust anymore. The sound of the front door creaking open brought her out of her thoughts. She stood quickly, her pulse racing, as a shadow appeared in the doorway. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw him. It was Alex. His face was pale, his eyes wide, filled with panic. "They're here," he said, his voice hoarse with urgency. She felt a jolt of fear shoot through her body. "What do you mean, they're here?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Who's here?" Alex rushed into the room, closing the door behind him with a hurried movement. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip tight. "I don't have time to explain," he said, his breath quickening. "You need to trust me. They found us. We don't have much time. We have to go. Now." Her mind raced. She wanted to protest, to demand more answers, but there was something in his eyes, something desperate, that made her hesitate. He was scared, truly scared, and that fear was enough to make her heart skip a beat. "Who are they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're the people I've been running from," he said, his tone shaky. "The ones I told you about. The ones who want to control everything. I've tried to keep them away from you, but now it's too late." The room suddenly felt too small, too confining. She could feel her breathing getting shallow as panic began to settle in. "Alex, please. What's happening? I don't understand any of this." He pulled her toward him, his eyes scanning the room, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "I don't have answers right now," he said, his voice tight with fear. "But you need to trust me. I swear to you, I've never wanted to drag you into this. I never wanted you to be part of this world. But we have no choice now. They'll stop at nothing." His words hit her like a wave, drowning her in a sea of fear. She felt her legs give way as she sank back down onto the bed. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex was pacing now, his fingers running through his hair. "We leave. We go somewhere they can't find us. We go underground. It's the only way to protect you." Her heart raced as the reality of what he was saying set in. She was about to leave everything behind, her home, her friends, her life. For what? To run from a shadowy group of people who wanted to control them? "Alex," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. This is insane." He stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression filled with regret. "I understand how you feel. You have every right to doubt me. But you need to listen to me. If you stay here, if we stay here, we're as good as dead. This isn't just some random thing. They're everywhere. They have eyes on us, even now." Her chest tightened. "Who are they? What do they want?" He hesitated, his face darkening. "They want control. They want to control everything. People like me, people who know too much. They use us to get what they want. They manipulate us, and they don't stop until they have everything." Her mind raced, trying to piece it all together. What was Alex not telling her? There were so many gaps in his story. She had no idea how deep this ran, how much of his life had been consumed by these people. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her believe that, deep down, he was still the man she loved. But how much of that man was real? "We need to go," he repeated, his voice hard with determination. "Right now." "Where?" she asked, her voice faltering. "Where will we go?" "I have a place," he said. "It's a safe house. No one knows about it. We can hide there until we figure out what to do next." Her head was spinning. This wasn't what she had imagined when she married him. None of this was what she had ever thought her life would become. "I can't just leave," she said, shaking her head. "I can't leave everything behind. I have a life here. I have family. Friends. You have to trust me, he said urgently. Your family and friends won't be safe if you stay here. And if we don't leave now, it'll be too late. They'll come for us, and when they do, we won't have any way out. His words felt like a punch to the gut. She could hear the urgency in his voice, but there was still so much she didn't understand. So much that didn't add up. I need time, she said, her voice almost pleading. I need to think. Time's up, he said softly, his eyes dark with worry. We don't have it. If we don't leave right now, we'll never get another chance. She felt the weight of his words. He was right. They didn't have time to waste. With a shaky breath, she stood. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's go. Alex grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. He opened it slowly, peering into the hallway to make sure no one was watching. Then, without another word, they stepped out into the night. The world outside seemed strangely quiet, as though holding its breath. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. She glanced back at the apartment door, feeling a pang of regret. Was this the right choice? Or was it the beginning of the end? There was no turning back now. The night was colder than it had ever been, each step feeling heavier as they moved further from the only life she had ever known. The city felt distant now, a cold, indifferent place that had once been home. But there was no home for her anymore. Not here. Not with what Alex had said, not with what had happened. Her mind was racing as they walked through the empty streets, the silence between them thick and suffocating. They hadn't spoken much since they left the apartment. It was almost as if the words they needed to say were trapped in the air, heavy and unreachable. Alex kept his eyes on the road, his face set in grim determination. She watched him closely, the way his jaw clenched with each step. He was hiding something, she could feel it. The air between them was filled with tension. But what could she say? What could she ask? He had already told her that the people he had been running from, the people she didn't know, were dangerous. And now they were coming for her. She didn't have the strength to fight him. She had no choice. She had to keep moving. But deep down, something had shifted inside her. A part of her was breaking away from him, a part of her was beginning to distrust him. She had believed in him, in their life together. But everything was a lie, wasn't it? They reached the alleyway that led to the safe house Alex had mentioned, the place where they would hide, where they could supposedly disappear. It wasn't much, just a nondescript door with no name, no sign to identify it. A part of her wanted to turn back, to scream, to run. But another part of her, her gut, the instinct she had been ignoring for so long, told her to go inside. Are you sure this is safe? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex didn't turn to her. It has to be, he said. There was a hardness in his voice that unsettled her. They reached the door. Alex didn't knock or ring a bell, he just pushed it open, leading her into the dark hallway. The air inside was stale, the smell of dust and something else, something faintly metallic. The floor creaked under their feet, as though it hadn't been walked on in years. She felt a cold shiver run through her as the door clicked shut behind them. The sound echoed in the empty space, making her feel trapped. Her heart began to pound in her chest. She was in this now. There was no going back. Alex led her further down the corridor, his movements sharp and purposeful. There were no windows here, no sense of time. The walls seemed to close in on them with each step, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Finally, Alex stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway and knocked twice. The sound was hollow, barely perceptible, but the person on the other side must have heard it because the door creaked open immediately. A man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at Alex. Then his gaze shifted to her, lingering for a moment before nodding. "This is her?" the man asked, his voice low and flat. Alex nodded. "This is her." The man stepped aside, letting them both inside. The room was small, sparsely furnished with just a few chairs and a table. In the corner, there was a makeshift bed covered with a thin blanket. The air in the room was thick, as if it had been closed off for far too long. She felt a sense of dread wash over her. Something wasn't right. The man didn't smile, didn't offer any words of comfort. He just stared at her like she was an object, something to be processed. "Make yourself comfortable," the man said in a voice that barely registered. "We'll need you to stay here for a while." "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why can't I leave?" The man didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, watching her, before his eyes flicked to Alex. Alex, who had been so confident before, now looked uncertain. He avoided her gaze, as if ashamed. "This isn't what it looks like," Alex said finally, his voice tight with emotion. "I'm trying to protect you. I swear." But the words didn't feel like a promise anymore. They felt empty. How could he protect her when he had been hiding so much from her? How could she trust him after everything? The silence between them grew thick and suffocating. The man in the corner shifted his weight, clearly growing impatient. "Alex," the man said, his voice sharp. "Alex," the man said, his voice sharp. "You're running out of time. They're already looking for you. If we don't move fast, we're all dead." The words hit her like a slap. Dead. The word echoed in her mind, too loud and too real. "Who are they?" she asked again, her voice rising in desperation. "Who are you people?" Alex's eyes flicked to the man, then to her. His jaw clenched. I never wanted you to know this, but you deserve the truth." The man nodded, stepping back slightly, giving Alex the floor. "It was time. Before I met you," Alex began, his voice hollow, "I was involved in something dangerous. I thought I could get out. I thought I could live a normal life. But I was wrong." She took a step back, feeling the weight of his words press against her chest. "What are you saying, Alex?" He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm not who you think I am. I wasn't just some guy trying to start over. I was part of a larger operation, an organization that deals in, well, things you wouldn't believe. And when I tried to leave, they didn't let me. They've been watching me. They've been watching us." Her stomach twisted. "What do they want from us?" The man finally spoke up, his voice cold and clinical. "Control. Power. They don't care about you. They don't care about Alex. They just want to make sure we don't reveal what we know." She could barely breathe. This wasn't just a bad dream. It was real. Her whole life, everything she thought she knew, had been a lie. "I thought I could protect you," Alex said, his voice breaking. "But I was wrong. And now it's too late. They're coming for us." For a moment, everything stood still. The weight of what Alex had said hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She couldn't process it. She couldn't grasp the full scope of what was happening. And then, in an instant, it all changed. The door slammed open, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. They were here. "Run," the man said sharply, his voice filled with urgency. She turned to Alex, fear and disbelief in her eyes. "What do we do?" Alex grabbed her hand. "We run. No matter what happens, you keep running. Don't look back." The world outside felt like a distant memory as they sprinted down the hallway, hearts pounding, adrenaline rushing through their veins. But she could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting. There was no way out. They were trapped. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew that everything Alex had said, everything he had kept hidden, was just the beginning. The real danger was still out there, waiting. The real test was yet to come. The tension in the air was suffocating, thick with uncertainty. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing down the hallway like a countdown to something inevitable. Her heart raced. Fear shot through her veins as she clutched Alex's hand tighter. The world outside the dimly lit hallway felt like a distant memory. Now, something she could never return to. "Alex, what do we do?" She could barely get the words out, her voice barely above a whisper. His grip on her hand tightened. There was no time for reassurances, no time for explanations. He was running on instinct now, and that instinct told him only one thing: they had to move. "We keep running," Alex said, his voice grim. "Do you trust me?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Did she trust him? Could she trust him after everything? After all the lies, the secrecy, the unknowns? But she had no choice. The footsteps were growing louder, the pressure unbearable. With a shaky breath, she nodded. Yes. That single word seemed to lift a weight from Alex's shoulders. For a moment, he looked like the man she had once known, the one she had loved, the one who had made promises he couldn't keep. But in the next instant, he was a man on the edge, fighting for survival. They sprinted down the narrow hallway, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the growing noise behind them. The door at the end of the corridor opened, and they were outside, into the night, into the unknown. The city stretched out before them, dark and imposing, but there was no time to stop and take in the view. They ran, their breaths ragged and shallow. The cold air bit at their skin, but there was no turning back now. Alex glanced over his shoulder. The figure from the doorway, the man who had been so cold and indifferent, was now nowhere to be seen. The threat had shifted. "Where do we go?" she asked, her voice barely audible against the pounding in her chest. Alex didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled her into a narrow alley between two buildings, ducking into the shadows. They stood still, listening. The footsteps had stopped. The silence was deafening. It felt like the calm before a storm. "This way," Alex finally said, pulling her along. They moved through the maze of alleyways, their shoes slapping against the wet pavement. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every turn, a dead end. It was as if the world itself was conspiring against them. But Alex's determination never wavered. He had a plan, at least, he hoped he did. "I'm sorry," he muttered, almost too quietly for her to hear. She looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "Sorry for what?" He met her gaze, his face drawn with exhaustion and regret. "For everything. For lying. For bringing you into this mess." Her heart squeezed. She wanted to ask him more, to demand the answers she so desperately needed. But the moment wasn't right. They were still running, still trying to escape. Alex stopped abruptly, pulling her into a narrow doorway that led to a stairwell. It was a basement, dimly lit, with an oppressive sense of isolation. The air smelled musty, stale. It was the kind of place that felt forgotten by the world. "Here," Alex said, his voice urgent. "We wait here. They won't find us." She felt the weight of his words sinking in. It was now or never. If they stayed, they might survive. But if they ran again, they might be caught. A sudden noise shattered the quiet, loud voices, shouts. It sounded like they were closing in on them. Her pulse quickened. "Alex, we need to move," she urged. But he stood frozen, his face pale. He wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were focused on something else, something just beyond her, something in the dark. Before she could turn, she felt it, cold, sharp. A feeling she couldn't explain. Something was watching them. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She turned quickly, but saw nothing. Just shadows. But in the silence that followed, she knew. They were never alone. "Alex," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "What's happening?" "I don't know," he whispered back. "I don't know anymore." And then the door behind them flew open. There was no time to react. The figures that emerged from the shadows were fast, their movements sharp and deliberate. There were at least 4 of them, all in dark clothing, their faces obscured by masks. They moved toward Alex and the woman with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "Move!" Alex shouted, pushing her toward the stairwell. They ran, but the figures were closing in fast. Alex was faster, more agile, his instincts kicking in as he pushed her ahead of him. "Don't stop," he ordered. But just as they neared the stairwell, one of the masked figures lunged at Alex, slamming him into the wall. He went down with a sickening thud, but not before grabbing a weapon from his jacket. "Get out of here," he yelled at her. "Go." She didn't know what to do. She couldn't leave him, not like this. But Alex's voice was filled with such desperation that she knew she had no choice. If she stayed, they would both be dead. With trembling hands, she turned and ran. The sounds of the struggle behind her were deafening, but she couldn't stop. The alleyway stretched out before her, but it felt endless. She was trapped, and she knew it. But then, just as she reached the end of the alley, a figure appeared in front of her, a man in a dark suit. He didn't say a word, just grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into a black SUV parked at the curb. "Get in," the man said in a low voice. She didn't hesitate. She had no choice. She was running out of time. As the car roared to life, she glanced back at the alley, the place where Alex had fallen. He had saved her, again. But what had all of it been for? Who could she trust now? As the car sped away into the night, the truth hit her like a wave. She was in this alone. The only way out was forward. And that was the hardest lesson of all.